It was probably about a month after the fire when my heart really started not to beat a million miles an hour. It was pretty frightening. The joke is that new? You know, because everything's new. And everything, I think, for a while will be new. My name is Joseph Ressa. Everybody calls me Joe. I'm what's called the chief rigging technician or the rigging gaffer on a TV show. So I do set lighting, and I've been doing this for about 40 years. We are sitting in the living room of my rental house. It's in Mount Washington. I've been here since March. I bought the house in Altadena in 2000. It was a small craftsman cottage on a pretty big lot on Pine Street between Santa Rosa, Christmas Tree Lane, and Lake Avenue. Had a big yard and basically planted it with like 1,000 square foot vegetable garden and fruit trees, and lived in this little house. And it was quite nice. Had great neighbors, great neighborhood, great community, incredibly diverse. If somebody gave me a magic wand and said, make the world that you want to see, it would be something just like that. People up there grew food and would put it out on the street and feed their neighbors. There was a very high degree of community consciousness, political consciousness. That carried through for decades and up until the fire, which was really heartbreaking. I had just gotten back from work and had eaten a little bit of dinner and was getting ready to go read. My neighbors came over and said, you know, there's a fire in Eaton Canyon. So I kind of put some clothes on and went outside. It was a little cool. When I got to the street, I mean, there were people just running up and down with pots and pans and bags full of clothes and all sorts of stuff. And the wind it would knock you down. Stuff was flying through the air, and I went, So I went in, and I had a go bag packed. So I got that together and grabbed a couple of files, and then I went down the street and started knocking on doors. And at that point, the embers were flying overhead. I'm talking about things the size of a shoebox. You could just hear the transformers blowing up and power going out. So at about 9:30, 9 o'clock, I threw everything in the back of the car and left. I ended up at my son's house for 2 months on the couch. The next day with Nilo, is my son's name. We drove up at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and the entire hillside was still on fire. I mean, people will say it looked like Hiroshima. There was nothing left. Black dirt, sticks of formerly giant trees, and chimneys. Power lines down everywhere. It was a hellscape. I could see that my house, the neighbor's house, everybody's house, actually the entire side of that block were gone. Fire survivors, a lot of them, myself included, are dealing with PTSD and other mental health issues, as well as just the realities of trying to rebuild your life from nothing. It's just crazy. It's like having the entire context of your life ripped away. You get to a point where you're mentally and emotionally exhausted. So when you have a minute to breathe, you're confronted with this void, and you can go to a pretty dark place. Really haven't made up my mind. I'm not going to rebuild on that particular lot. Quite frankly, look, I'm going to be 71. I'm not sure I want to spend 5 to 8 years in a rebuilding process in a place where probably not the healthiest place to be right now. The other thing is the vast majority of people were underinsured. If the insurer was to pay what's called your coverage A limit. It would be way below what it would cost to rebuild. So I'm going to take a year and let it percolate, and see where I think I might land. The hardest thing I had to learn was to shut up, say thank you. Everything in this house is basically a cast-off from a prop warehouse. The set decorating crew came up and unloaded a truck and put everything in here, and I did not walk into an empty house. One of our directors of photography, Jean Tyson, started a GoFundMe, which I begged her not to, and she did, and it was incredible. I was like blown away. Really? People from all over the world. My family supported me, but the people at work, most importantly, emotional support from them. Without that, I think I would have done far worse. Los Angeles can be a big, sprawling, lonely, unfriendly place sometimes. But what people from outside the area don't know is that it's this giant coalition of smaller communities that are very tight, and communities within communities. And when faced with something like this, Angelinos are incredible. If somebody wants to help you, they're also receiving something from you when you say yes. I spent a lot of my life trying to avoid being the person who needs help. Most of us do. You really have to make a mental adjustment, an emotional adjustment. I'm not a particularly religious person, but if you have a spiritual path in your life, you have to connect with that. As my friend Junot would say, you're a poppy seed on the bagel of life. You're one small speck and you belong here. But it's not easy. It gets easier, but it's still a little odd,
The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers says it is almost done clearing debris from homes destroyed by LA's January fires. When it comes to recovery, the federal agency is way ahead of schedule. Officials are even calling it the fastest wildfire cleanup in history. But as officials hope clearing red tape will speed along the next steps, there's a massive bump in the road. Many survivors don't have enough money to rebuild or move back home. From LA Times Studios, this is Rebuilding LA. I'm Kate Cagle. Over the past few months, we've been talking to fire victims and hearing similar stories. Many of their insurance policies will not cover the cost of rebuilding or replacing what they lost. 7 months after this disaster, even people with homes that withstood the fires are still displaced because they're wrangling over the cost of the cleanup and testing. And for those who are rebuilding, some say they are not getting their insurance money fast enough to pay their contractors. The complaints against insurance companies have quickly escalated, resulting in lawsuits and an investigation into at least one insurance company, State Farm, about how it has handled these claims. All this on top of the already fragile home insurance market in California. Laurence Darmiento is a reporter with the Los Angeles Times. He covers the insurance market and is here to catch us up. Hi, Laurence. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm happy to be here, Kate.
Well, I saw one statistic that said as many as 7 in 10 wildfire survivors are having issues with their insurance. So let's start with the big picture. What is the overall outlook when it comes to people rebuilding in the Palisades and Altadena?
Well, the fact is that this fire was unprecedented, right? I mean, just thousands and thousands of homes burning in an urban area. Nobody's seen anything like this. Everyone's grappling with this, and the insurance companies are trying to grapple with it. And homeowners, suddenly you have masses of homeowners, right? Not just a handful, not just a few hundred. We're talking about thousands of people at the same time trying to figure out what to do. So when you cited that statistic, I'm totally not surprised.
So I know you've been talking to so many homeowners, fire survivors. What is kind of the quick list of complaints that you're hearing?
Well, the quick list isn't that quick, but I'll try to make it quick. I mean, we have homeowners that are very upset because they've been cycled through multiple adjusters. They've received estimates to repair their properties that were developed by their adjusters that were on site, and then they were cut by the home office, apparently. They're homeowners that are dealing with the FAIR plan and its smoke damage policy, which has come under legal attack. State Farm General, the California's largest home insurer, has been accused of being stingy in how it's handled smoke damage claims and rotating adjusters. And oh my God, you just name it. There's just so many issues to try to grapple with. And, the really weird thing about this is that I've seen comments, multiple comments, I've received emails, I've talked to people, is that some people whose homes were left standing but were damaged by smoke, maybe a broken window and ash came in, that sort of thing. Those people say they wish their home burned down. I have encountered people who have told me, I wish my home had burned down. How is that?
Right.
Well, how that is that there's very specific laws regarding what insurers must pay in terms of, alternative living arrangements and how much money has to come up front for people whose homes have burned down. There's like a lot of established law there, a lot of regulations. However, when it comes to this issue of smoke damages, and, that's a whole nother story. But now you have a situation where you had an urban fire, right, that swept through these neighborhoods on the west side, in San Gabriel Valley. I've never seen winds like that. Those winds, which is carrying that fire, billowing, and people's homes who were standing, oftentimes there were broken windows. Even if there weren't broken windows, those winds were so powerful that they carried in dust and particulate matter and smoke and ash into these homes. And they just, in many cases, just infiltrated everything. Not just like on your kitchen table or some buildup of ash by the bottom of your door or something, in the insulation. And so now all of a sudden you're in a situation where you're trying to deal with your insurance company and try to explain to them the kind of position you're in. And that's where things have gotten really tricky.
So what I hear you saying is when we hear these statistics, like over 10,000 homes destroyed, that's not even the full picture because the damage is much more widespread than that.
There's so many standing homes that are uninhabitable. And unfortunately, 6 months plus after the fires, many people have not been able to move back into their homes.
Can you give us an example? I know you've been talking to a lot of folks who are going through this process of wrangling with their insurance. Like, what is the most absurd story that you've heard?
Well, I wrote about a homeowner in Altadena named Amy Harity, and her home was the only home still standing, and there was just maybe 36 homes around their home that were burned down or something like that. And they had just terrible smoke damage, soot, ash, you name it, infiltrated the home. And I wrote a story that started out with an anecdote about her. And why did I use that anecdote? Because I thought nothing really explained what these folks are up against and what they're struggling with, then the fact that the lunch that she was like preparing for her kids for school is still standing there on the kitchen table.
So what's the delay?
Well, in her case, and this is very similar to other situations I've heard. So, you have basically a fight over how much damage is there and are there toxic chemicals. And in her case, she had to go and pay for her own kind of limited testing to discover there, in fact, were, I think it was like lead in her case. But imagine that back and forth went on for months.
And she's still displaced,
she is
essentially.
still displaced, yes.
Why do you think it's been so hard for the companies to process these claims? Do you get a sense that it's just the volume or kind of the unprecedented nature of some of this?
There's two insurers that have received the bulk of the criticism. Okay, so the first one being State Farm General, which is California's largest home insurer, roughly 20% of the market. They had kind of built up market share late last decade. In 2024, they actually cut like 72,000 policies because they looked at their exposure and they didn't like what they saw. So At the time of the fires, I think they had roughly 250,000 policyholders in Los Angeles County. That's a lot, right? I don't
That's a
know.
lot.
Yeah, I've never seen a total figure for the number of policyholders they had in the Eaton or the Palisades fire zones, but it's lots in the thousands when you combine the two zones. They have been subject to a lot of criticism. They're basically accused of being very stingy. Again, the issues typically over how much testing should be done and how much remediation should be done. So some of this remediation of these homes can be really extensive. So if you take a look at all the money at stake times the number of policyholders, you might get a sense of why an insurer would be kind of like wanting policyholders to dot their I's and cross their T's. And of course, they have to pay their claims. And a lot of people are very unhappy.
So what has been State Farm's response to all these complaints?
State Farm has been adamant that it feels it's doing an adequate job, more than adequate job. Matter of fact, it told me that it feels that a quote-unquote overwhelming majority of its policyholders are satisfied with how the company is handling its claims. The other one is the California Fair Plan, what's the insurer of last resort. And its issue with smoke damage claims goes back to like 2017 when they kind of changed the wording on their policies. They wanted to see physical changes to the property before they would remediate or pay for things for smoke damage. You say there's a fire and there's smoke, your house smells smoky. So there, if you go to the California Fair Plan, they would typically tell you to try to clean it yourself, maybe use some sort of deodorizer, things like that. And they were very reluctant under this policy language that they adopted, and they're very reluctant to actually go in there and send in professional cleaning. They're particularly, according to fire victims, reluctant to have testing done, industrial testing done, where you can see if there's lead, there's asbestos, there's other sorts of chemicals that may have infiltrated your home. It's one thing potentially if you have a home in let's say the Sierra Nevadas, and there's some forest fire up there, and that's one thing. Consider having your home still standing after the Altadena fire, the Pacific Palisades fire, where around you other homes have burned, transformers have burned, cars have burned. The issues that the Fair Plan has had in terms of their smoke damage policy have only just been sort of exacerbated by the fact that this was an urban conflagration.
People are pretty angry, and now the lawsuits are flying. So why are folks suing?
Well, there's a few lawsuits that basically claim they were left underinsured, due to their various policies. Not a ton, but there have been a handful. I think the most bottom line answer I can give you is that you had homeowners that have been out of their house since the day of those fires, and months and months and months have passed, and they don't see when they're getting back in.
We are going to get more into what's going on with State Farm and the Fair Plan. But first, I want to get this overall sense of how we ended up here, where so many people are saying that they're underinsured. They have insurance, but it's not going to cover what it's going to take to rebuild. Is that a surprise that so many people, their policy is just not going to do it?
Let's just talk a little bit about how underinsurance happens. These fires that have disturbed the whole California homeowners market really kind of go back about a decade or so. And there was concerns that State Farm General had left their policyholders underinsured. And so the State Department of Insurance looked at policyholders. They did like a sampling of claims. And so what it found was that there were a number of policyholders that were left underinsured. And in that case, it sort of like pointed to just the insurance practices of the insurer, basically accused them of allowing their policyholders not to buy enough insurance. And so what State Farm said, and this was from a market conduct exam, its response was, the law is that people that buy our policies, they need to make sure that they've bought enough insurance. Okay, that's one instance. Like you just don't get enough insurance from the get-go, right? But now you have the situation, this incredible, unprecedented fire in Los Angeles County, and you have suddenly not just dozens, not just hundreds, but you have like thousands of people trying to rebuild their homes. So what do you think happens in that case? This is like economics 101. demand exceeds supply. So all of a sudden it gets pretty expensive to hire a contractor, or, it gets expensive to get all the plumbing you need or whatever.
And isn't the estimated cost like $1,000 a square foot?
Yes, I've heard that. Of course, people like watching this podcast who like live, you just name a state outside California, they'd be like, $1,000 a square foot? Are you kidding me? I could build a Taj Mahal here. Well, I'm sorry, it's Southern California. We're the second most populous urban area in the country. It just costs more. The California insurance market is one of the largest in the world, just this state alone.
We'll continue our conversation with Laurence after a short break.
California ratepayers face some of the nation's highest electricity costs, with a decades-old solar policy at the center of debate. Net energy metering was introduced in the 1990s to boost rooftop solar by letting homeowners sell excess power back to the grid at full retail rates. But now, the California Public Advocate's Office reports that households without solar are subsidizing those with rooftop systems through higher electricity rates. The Fix the Cost Shift Coalition points out that this shift has led to equity concerns. Solar adoption concentrates among higher-income homeowners, while costs burden renters and lower-income families. Assemblymember Lisa Calderon authored legislation to address the cost shift while maintaining solar incentives at 76 to 82% of current levels. Support Assemblymember Calderon and help fix California's electricity crisis. Learn more at fixthecostshift.org. That's fixthecostshift.org. California lawmakers, big oil is slick. Don't slip. Big oil lobbyists are working hard to roll back climate and clean energy progress to keep their profits soaring and California hooked on their dirty, expensive energy. We can't afford to slip on big oil's slick PR and lobbying. Keep California moving forward with affordable, clean energy and transportation. Learn more at don'tslipca.org, paid for by California environmental voters.
We are back with Rebuilding LA. All right, we've already started the conversation about State Farm, which is getting the bulk of the criticism. Why is that? Why are people so upset with State Farm?
State Farm is the largest largest insurer in California. I think they've estimated that they're going to pay, $7.6 billion in claims. I haven't seen any new estimate, but that's a lot of claims payouts, right? And they've handled, I think, over, I forget the numbers now, it might be over 10,000 claims or something. It's a huge number of claims, right? Now, the issue with State Farm is that, like many insurance companies in the United States, how they work is that there's potentially often a home office, and they're operate in different states. And in the case of California, there's State Farm Group, let's just call it State Farm Group, which is the home headquarters is in Bloomington, Illinois. And then we have State Farm General, which is the entity that covers California claims. They're facing more claims than other insurers. And, the company basically has claimed that they're in financial distress. The big thing that really gets people is last summer, they asked for a 30% homeowners rate hike and rate hikes for some other property insurance that they offer, but 30% for homeowners. That was kind of surprising. The company had built up a lot of market share, and then it started withdrawing from the market. And last year, it announced it would not renew 72,000 property policies. That's a lot of policies.
That's a lot.
Yep. And then it asked for this big, huge rate increase. And then the fires happened. So you have a situation where you have the state's largest home insurer asking for a huge rate increase, trying to pay claims, and it certainly has more claims than any other, commercial insurer by far. And people started getting upset in terms of how State Farm was handling claims. They were complaining about, being on 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 adjusters, rotated adjusters. And they would say that the adjusters would would come to the site, come to their house, do a visit, calculate what they thought that the rebuild, whatever the damage might have been, whether it was smoke or whether something else. And then someone in the home office would go and slash it. And all of a sudden, they weren't getting what they thought they were getting. So that was a complaint.
And in response, we've had some of these vocal groups emerge after the fires. In Altadena, there's the Eaton Fire Survivors Network. What are they hoping to accomplish here?
Well, The Eaton Fire Survivors Network was co-founded by a woman named Joy Chen, who used to be a deputy mayor in Los Angeles. And I'll be honest, like she's like a force of nature. She's like built up that group. They now claim to have more than 7,000 members. They've done some extraordinary work in terms of representing folks in Altadena who have had issues with their insurers. They have specifically been mostly focusing on State Farm General because State Farm General is, I think, the largest insurer there. I don't know if no one's done a scientific survey, so I don't know really what the answer is. But I can tell you that there are literally hundreds of complaints were submitted by the Eaton Group to the insurance commissioner over how their claims are being handled. And so the primary goal, I would say, of the group is to prevent State Farm from getting any further rate increases until all issues are resolved. Now, to be clear, State Farm already received a 17% quote-unquote interim rate hike after this year. It was approved by the insurance commissioner. It was actually recommended by an administrative law judge who said that he felt State Farm General was in financial kind of shaky financial shape even before the fires. And this group tried to dissuade the insurance commissioner from approving this 17% hike. They weren't successful. And now they want to prevent the company from getting any more rate increase. And, being able to build some political support. There was a press conference that was held last month, and you had the state senator, also Catherine Barger, the supervisor, all come out in support of a freeze on any kind of rate hike until some of these issues are resolved. People want what they paid for, which is in their policies, which has policy limits, which, describes what they have to do to file a claim. They want those honored. And lots of people feel like, not everyone. I've heard good things about lots of various insurers, but people that aren't getting what they feel they deserve are very upset. The California Insurance Commissioner announced a market conduct exam of State Farm General a little while ago. They're going to be looking at how they've been handling these claims. That potentially could result in, I suppose it could result in various fines or whatever.
So State Farm got approval for this emergency rate hike earlier this year, back in May, but it upset a lot of people. Why were people upset about the rate hike?
I think there's a general principle that I think the State Farm policyholders, or many of them, adhere to, which is they don't feel they're getting their money's worth from State Farm. So why should an insurer that they feel is not giving them their money's worth be given additional income? Right, is a highly regulated system. And so what they want and what the Eaton Group has pushed for strongly has been for let's clear up what the claims problems are. And when we clear that up, then we can consider the rate increase. The issue has been, from the insurance commissioner's perspective, is that they're legally two separate issues, and he can't combine the two. And he's been steadfast in that interpretation, I guess I'll call it interpretation of the law, for months. And it's caused a lot of difficulty for the insurance commissioner. Let's put it like that. It's put him in quite a spot.
What is the public perception right now from the folks that you've been talking to about how Ricardo Lara has been handling all of this?
They're obviously not pleased. I mean, again, what they want to see one come before the other. His response is that, we have a mechanism in state law that governs how we handle proposed rate increases, and we follow that letter of the law. And I'm sure he feels like if he didn't follow it, that they'd get sued, by the company because they're deviating from the law. I take it that's a concern of his, right? But here's the thing. I mean, he's getting pressure not just from policyholders, but by people like John Garamendi, who served 2 terms as insurance commissioner, was widely liked by consumer advocate types. And he has just ruthlessly criticized Lara over that stance.
Lara and his department launched a series of reforms that were supposed to stabilize the market. Where do those reforms stand now?
California, just a little bit of history that I'm sure you've heard about. We are currently under an insurance regime that started in 1988 with the passage of Prop 103 and the establishment of a elected insurance commissioner with authority over rates. It gives consumer advocates a lot of a big avenue to get in there during these rate increases, or these hearings, and advocate for lower rates. That said, there's criticism has built up in recent years that, hey, look, this initiative stems from 1988. Come on, it's now decades later. Maybe we need some quote unquote reforms. So what does that mean? So there's two really big areas that the insurance industry wanted reforms. And basically the implication in advocating this, they're basically saying, you give us these reforms and you won't see some of the market withdrawals. So there was a series of companies that announced they were either not writing new insurance or literally withdrawing from the market. People were starting to freak out. This was going back several years now. People were very upset because fewer companies you have, the more your insurance is probably going to cost. There's just less competition, right? It's just not a good thing. There was an attempt in 2023 to get some of these reforms through the legislature, and that failed. When that failed in September of that year, the governor basically gave his political blessing to Lara to basically go and implement these new changes to the law through executive orders. And that's what happened right before the fire started. So there was a bunch of stuff, not going to talk about it all, but I'll talk about kind of the two main ones. So one of the first ones was they wanted to be able to use these things called catastrophic computer models, CAT models they're called, in setting rates. What does that mean, CAT models? Everybody's probably just their eyes are rolling at this point. So let me try to make it clear. So under Prop 103, in order to set rates, you have to look at your past claims. Well, the insurance industry, it was looking at something called climate change, right? Maybe, past claims aren't the only way to go and set rates. That's a pretty powerful argument, right? How are you going to deny the insurance companies from citing climate change and trying to set their rates, right?
Right.
So they were able to get from Lara the opportunity to use these models, okay? And so what just started happening in January, right before the fires came out, was that these models started to be reviewed. And these models, what do? They basically include just a zillion variables in trying to set rates. So it could be your distance from a fire station. It could be how much, what your siding is, how compact your subdivision is. Just a zillion possible things that could contribute to a fire. They got the ability to do this. Those models were being reviewed. The fires hit. The second thing they got, and this is really important, is that insurance companies, when they write insurance, they had to consider the possibility of there being just these catastrophic fires and build that into their rates. It would be insurance would be uninsurable. So what they do is they buy what's called reinsurance. That is, they go to these huge international companies and they say, look, if we get hit with some catastrophe that's over this amount of money that we have to pay out, you guys are going to handle it. And so that's traditionally how insurance companies, protect themselves from catastrophic fires. However, in California, under Prop 103, they weren't allowed to charge California policyholders for the cost of that reinsurance. Okay? So what they got was the right to charge California policyholders for the reinsurance. So suddenly they can use these catastrophe models. They can charge California policyholders for the cost of their reinsurance in setting rates. Now, those two things, they may sound a little esoteric to you. Maybe we've lost the audience. I have no idea. But
they tuned in for the insurance episode, so it's all fair game.
But very, very important for the industry. They fought really hard for that. Lara gave it to them in exchange for something that's important, which was they had to agree. It was kind of like a grand bargain. I don't know what you want to call it. They had to agree to increase the number of policies that they wrote in high-risk fire zones. And there's a formula that I will not, despite the fact people tuned in to listen to insurance, I am not going to discuss that formula on this program. But they have to do this. They have to increase the amount of coverage in these fire areas. For what it's worth, that grand bargain itself has been criticized by some consumer advocates because they don't believe that the formula is really going to be enforced or is enforceable, and it's kind of loosey-goosey. And if, insurers actually don't make those numbers that they're supposed to make, the insurance commissioner can kind of give them a little break, and they have to just meet lower numbers. So there's a whole big controversy about that. So that is something that that was, in the works for several years.
So what does this all mean for people who are now trying to rebuild?
Well, I think what it means, that's something that's going to potentially provide some help to insurers and hopefully policyholders, although that's in dispute in the future. In terms of what's going to help right now, I've heard a lot of good things about a number of insurers, but again, State Farm General and the California Fair Plan, there's been a lot of criticism. In both those cases, in the case of State Farm General, as I said, there's a market conduct exam. In the case of the California Fair Plan, the insurance commissioners just announced another type of investigation and threatened them with fines if they continue to treat smoke damage claims the way they've done it. There are some threats coming from the department.
All right, well, let's take a quick break, and then we're going to get into the Fair Plan with Laurence when we come back.
Hi, my name's Jordan, and I'm a producer at LA Times Studios. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about our new sponsor, Ollie. Like many dog owners, my dog Zooms has become like a child to me. And with that type of responsibility comes the constant need to keep them happy and healthy. One way I make her mealtime a little bit better is through Ollie. Ollie delivers clean, fresh nutrition in 5 drool-worthy flavors, even for the pickiest eaters. Made in U.S. kitchens with the highest quality, human-grade ingredients, Ollie's food contains no fillers, no preservatives, just real food. And here's the thing. Healthier food means a happier pup. More energy, shinier coats, better poops, and more excitement at mealtime. Fill out Ollie's 30-second quiz, and they'll create a customized meal plan based on your pup's weight, activity level, and other health info. For any first-timers, Ollie will send out your pup's first box with 2 weeks' worth of meals, a free storage container for mess-free serving, and a guide of how to gradually switch them over to their new diet. Dogs deserve the best, and that means fresh, healthy food. Head to ollie.com/rebuildingla, tell them all about your dog, and use code RebuildingLA to get 60% off your welcome kit. Plus, they offer a happiness guarantee on the first box, so if you're not completely satisfied, you'll get your money back. That's OLLIE.com/rebuildingLA and enter code RebuildingLA to get 60% off your first box.
Rebuild SoCal Partnership is taking a powerful look at the union workers and contractors who are helping to rebuild our communities after the devastating wildfires. In this episode, we follow the amazing journey of Sandra Molina, a single mother of 3 who went from drug addiction and homelessness to rebuilding her life with the help of the laborers union. Sandra is now a hazmat worker in Altadena, preparing the ground for families to rebuild their homes. Tune in.
All right, we are back with Rebuilding LA and with Laurence Darmiento talking about insurance. And we finally gotten to the Fair Plan, which was supposed to be the plan of last resort. But now more and more people, enrollment boomed starting back in 2020, as you reported. How many people in the Eaton and Palisades fire zones were actually on the Fair Plan?
So we had one of our data specialists look at this, and the numbers that she came up with was that from 2020 to 2024, the number of homes in both areas nearly doubled from 14,000 to 28,000 and change. And that mirrored an incredible growth also statewide. So back in 2021, there was under 250,000 policyholders on the Fair Plan. There's now almost 600,000.
600,000?
Yes, which is crazy. And also it has, in terms of the financial exposure, meaning potentially the max amount it could pay out to these people, it's gone from $160 billion to $600 billion. So that's a boatload of money. And
these are all people who've been deemed too risky to have any other insurance?
Traditionally, that has been what the Fair Plan was for. You couldn't find a policy anywhere else because you're just too crazy risky, right? And nobody wants anything to do with you. So you go to the Fair Plan. And the Fair Plan's numbers were fairly small. But these days, are you really that risky, or did someone just pull out, and no one wants to insure you? The Fair Plan, just to be clear, was originated by a statute of the legislature, but it's run by insurance companies. All the home insurers are licensed in California, basically operate and are responsible for the FAIR Plan. So they partake in any kind of profits, of which I don't think there's a lot, and they have to back if there's any losses. Clearly, one of the biggest issues with the FAIR Plan has been, once again, smoke damage. I got to tell you, if people have criticized State Farm General in terms of how it's handled smoke damage claims, the accusations against the FAIR Plan have been much greater, to the point where Insurance Commissioner Lara basically took action against them this summer and basically said, you're operating under an illegal policy and you need to basically change what you're doing, and you need to, and if you don't, we could possibly get cease and desist orders against you. So the FAIR Plan is facing serious potential legal action from the Department of Insurance over this matter. And, the problem is that it shouldn't be a problem, because the FAIR Plan shouldn't have so many customers. But it's a huge problem because they do, and we just had a giant fire in Los Angeles.
We've been out there speaking to homeowners, and there's a lot of fear that even if they still had insurance to rebuild, that they could still be dropped tomorrow.
Well, certainly that's more than a theoretical possibility. It's quite possible. That said, sort of the pullout from the market seems to have been kind of like slowed or stemmed. And the reality is that the insurance industry did get what it wanted from Lara in terms of these quote-unquote reforms. And I have to say that you started to see some new rates come in, and some decisions to press forward and continue, or maybe even expand policies. Any individual insurer could likely find insurance. The real question at the end of the day is, what is it going to cost? The reason that California is facing this is not in some sort of some would say in the industry that California's rules aren't good. They needed reform. They needed these things that have occurred. But the bigger picture is that, you've seen this increase in these kind of catastrophic events, not just fires, but floods and convective storms, you name it. The UN has decided that meteorologists have come together and said that man is causing, it's man-made climate change. So as long as climate change continues, potentially gets worse, I don't see anything yet that is any kind of sort of silver bullet, something that is going to fundamentally resolve these issues that the insurance industry is facing. It seems to clearly be facing more catastrophic events. At the same time, you have homeowners who, are facing increased costs in all areas of their life, and suddenly their insurance is just going through the roof. I've heard people whose insurance has gone from, a few $1,000s to multiple times that. Just really expensive. Potentially, I guess it might be worse in Los Angeles, but I think these are issues that are really facing the industry across the country and really across the world.
Well, thank you so much for unpacking that, because it's a lot. Thank you for covering it. There's just so many angles to get into, and it's been so impactful for the rebuild. So thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
That is Laurence Darmiento with the Los Angeles Times. Thanks so much for being here. Next week, we will take a look at the big insurance market picture, how stable or not it is in California, and what the future may hold. Please join us for that. And as always, thank you for listening to this podcast. You can find us anywhere you listen, and please subscribe and leave us a review. You can even watch us on YouTube. That's it for us today. Now, a word from our sponsor.
Homeowners are rebuilding in Altadena. Sandra Molina, a hazmat worker, is rebuilding too. Rebuilding her life. Years ago, addicted to drugs and living on the streets, she ended up pregnant and on welfare. Then joined the Laborers Union Apprenticeship Program. Rebuild SoCal Partnership recently met Sandra at her home at 4 a.m., preparing for work, and followed her to Altadena to meet her hazmat cleanup crew.
Some people have a 9 to 5. I have a 6 to 2:30. I'm working 12-hour shifts. My kids have their shoes, their school supplies, clothing. We have money in our savings. Well, I became a drug addict at 17. I was homeless in these streets. I was an addict from 17 to 22. At 22, I found that I was pregnant. My whole life changed. I went through the laborers boot camp in August of 2023. I passed it, and on that Friday that I passed it, Monday I had a job. I'm proud of my kids. They've really adapted to my work schedule, which I thought was gonna be very hard for them. That's just my dream goal right now, is to give them a bigger home. So it's definitely been a long journey, and my 3 kids have been with me throughout the journey. Right now we're going to go see my foreman for our daily morning meeting. And then I get to my job site, I start talking to my crew, and we start talking about any safety hazards, and we get suited and we go in there and we do our thing. Watch out for the machine swing radius and between the wall, and just be aware and alert at all times. Wear your PPE, clean your mask, and wear your gloves and the latex over, safety glasses. It feels good to be here and to be doing something for the community, because once the ash and debris removal has happened to the property, that means the homeowner can come and reclaim it and start thinking about rebuilding. It's just an amazing feeling. And then there's 2 people inside, so that's where we go in with our hand tools, shovels, rakes. We're removing ash and debris, load it into the trucks, get it out, and turn in our properties.
Jaime Hauragi, a representative of Anvil Builders, Sandra's employer, was happy to talk about the qualities she brought to her work.
Sandra's been incredible, right, to say the least. She brings grit, teamwork, determination, all the qualities that we're looking for in an individual to help us run such a complex project like this one.
The hazmat class was very important to us because it let us know what we were going to be facing out in the field. So they taught us how to suit up, to wear the APR half face with the clean filters to filter out any contaminants.
Laborers Union leader John Preciado met Sandra at work to offer his support.
We in Southern California invest a tremendous amount of time and resources into our apprenticeship program, and we build skilled and trained workers. We're extremely proud of Sandra and the efforts that we've put into her, but also what she's put into herself. We are the original union of second chances, and she has demonstrated that she was worthy of that chance. She's rebuilt her life, and now she is rebuilding Altadena.
I feel like the union helped me rebuild my life. Feels good to be able to do something for the community, and for my kids to see that you could always choose to do the right thing.
After work, her daughter Abigail was the first to meet her as she walked in the door.
My mom works very hard so I could have a better life. The thing that I love about my mom is that she's very caring, and even though she comes home late, she still tries to buy me and my brothers whatever we want because she loves us very much.
When I felt like everything was gonna swallow me, like the ground, I would look over to them and I'd be like, I can't give up. I have 3 people depending on me. I have to keep going. I want to be able to get a home for me to leave for my children to inherit.
They get up at 4 a.m., they work till 6 p.m., usually 7 days a week. Let's be thankful that these workers are here, building careers and helping the community at the same time.
Being out here has helped me rebuild my life, and in a sense, I have also helped rebuild homeowners' life. So definitely, I know that I'm gonna be driving around here and I'm gonna tell my daughter, I worked on this property and this property and this property, and look how it looks now. So it feels good.
Rebuilding LA is hosted by and reported on by me, Kate Cagle. Our senior producer and showrunner is Megan Larson. Our associate producers are Jordan Patterson and Megan Botel. Our video director is Julia McCabe, our director of post-production is Patrick Stewart, and our senior sound recording engineer is Nick Norton, with audio engineering help from David Iskandarian and motion graphics by Dougal Henkin. Our video editors are Peter Grayson and Daniel Flesher. Ben Church is our senior coordinating producer, and Anne-Marie Hauser is our production manager. Our podcast marketing manager is Bryn Jura, and our product marketing director is Becca Dorman. Our general counsel at the LA Times is Jeff Glasser. Special thanks to President and Chief Operating Officer of the Los Angeles Times, Chris Argenteri, and the executive editor of the Los Angeles Times, Terry Tang. Rebuilding LA is co-created by LA Times Studios president Anna Migzanian and executive produced and co-created by Darius Derrickson. And one final thank you to all the residents of Altadena and the Pacific Palisades for sharing your stories with us.